Hey, I'm Lana from Lana Glowshot Art, and in this video, we'll be unboxing the January 2024 sketch box. This box is all about trying out different kinds of pastels on toned paper, and I'm going to take you through drawing a red panda step by step with several studies and a final drawing. Ready? Let's go. The surface in this month's box is the Rembrandt Toned Sanguine Red paper. This paper is great with a variety of different materials, including the 3 sticks of Willow Charcoal by Royal Talons that also come in this box. I like to work with a smaller piece of Willow Charcoal, so I actually break my charcoal before I use it. Charcoal is a very loose, impermanent material, and by that I mean it can move around the page, and your mark that you lay down is not necessarily the mark you're going to be left with because it can move. You can use this to your advantage though to erase and move around initial drawings. Always make sure you do this with a clean finger so that you can actually take the charcoal away. I am so excited for you to try the Derwent drawing pencils. These are some of my favorite colored pencils, and this set includes ivory black, light sienna, and Chinese white. Derwent drawing pencils are special because they are very soft, waxy pencils that lay down really opaque color. But the best way to do this is layer by layer. Here I am layering the ivory black, and I started with a really thin layer of color, and then I am building it up, going in different directions. To achieve a gradient, you start out with a lot of pressure, and I'm usually holding closer to the tip of my pencil for this. And then as I ease up on pressure, I'm pulling my hand away so that I can use the lightest touch possible. I am also using the side of my pencil rather than the tip, and I go back and forth and create this effect layer by layer. This pencil does not smudge at all, so it is a complete contrast to your vine charcoal. So that means that in this set, you have 2 different black materials, and you can choose which one will work best for you based on what step you're on in a given project. If you're new to working on a toned surface like this sanguine red paper, it can be difficult to judge your values at first. Right now, this light sienna looks like it's almost white, but when you compare it to the white, you can tell that it is a slightly darker value. Playing around and swatching colors on this paper is going to help you start judging and seeing values in a way that you never have before. Let's put these materials together to create some small, quick studies of red pandas. When you create a quick study, the first step is to lay out the basic shapes. So I've got the circle for the head, a slightly oval shape for the body, and just a line to mark where the tail is going to be. Then I ghost down this image with my finger so that it's very, very light, and I can come in with my ivory black Derwent drawing colored pencil with more permanent marks. And this allows me to come in with a lot of confidence, but already knowing where my mark is going to be and that they're accurate. So this is a great way to make your drawings look more accurate and more confident than they might otherwise if you just went in straight away with the Derwent drawing colored pencil. Let's create a few more exploring this red panda in different poses. For this second one, I quickly realized that it wasn't quite the right shape and wasn't going to fit on my paper right, but because I was working with the Willow Charcoal, I was able to just dust that first sketch off and keep going. Before going back in with my Derwent drawing pencil, I went ahead and blocked in all of the bodies that I was going to use on this paper. And then I switched materials and came in with harder, more confident marks. I do want to note that I'm pressing pretty hard with this Derwent drawing colored pencil, and because the wax in this pencil is so soft, you might get a little bit of breakage when you press hard with this pencil. And just keep in mind that that's very normal for the tip to break off just a little bit. Keep a sharpener handy and just keep going. The pastels in this set include the Rembrandt Rich Orange set of 5 half sticks, and also 2 Carbothello pastel pencils in Caput Mortem Red and English Deep Red. Let's swatch these colors, and they're already arranged in the box in order from lightest to darkest. So we'll start with the lightest value and lay it down really heavily towards the top. As I move lower down on the page, I'm easing off the pressure, and I'm also using my finger to blend and to make that transition even smoother. When I move on to the second color, I can go right over the top of the first one and work on a light pressure towards the top, heavier pressure in the middle, and then easing it off again as I get ready to transition into the third color. These pastels lay down a ton of really soft, beautiful pigment, and it lays right down on top of the paper. So you'll get a little bit of dust that accumulates on top as these soft pastels break down, and you can use this dust to just blend with your finger, or you can blow the dust off of the paper so that it doesn't smear or smudge, depending on the effect that you want. This set also includes a really deep, warm, rich brown so that you can push your orange values darker, and you even have a black in this set as well. If you choose to blend with your finger rather than another tool, just keep in mind what colors you've blended with previously and make sure that you don't have any extra on your fingers. This box includes pastel sticks and also pastel pencils, so you can experiment with both and figure out which one you like the best. This deep English red is a more red-brown tone and is great for those desaturated areas in the red panda that we're going to be drawing. And this Caput Mortem red is more of a red-violet, and this is going to add some contrast to the more red-orange tones that we have in our color palette so far. With all of these colors swatched next together, there is a really harmonious color story that is beginning to emerge. These colors are based around a red-orange, and this is giving us a very hot, fiery color scheme, which is perfect for this month's prompt, Flame. For this first study, I'd like you to begin with a really loose sketch using the willow charcoal. As you sketch, focus on the basic shapes and don't worry too much about this being perfect. This is just a fur study to warm up and get us ready for the main event. Once everything is sketched in, you're going to start with your pastels first. And here I'm starting with the darkest pastels, although there isn't a specific rule that you have to start dark or you have to start light. You can make either approach work. The most important thing when drawing fur is that you're drawing small, short, individual strokes rather than a scribble. I'm looking very closely at the reference here, and I'm making sure I understand what direction the fur is growing. Then my brush strokes, or my pastel strokes rather, follow that specific direction. I have used that warm brown, and now I'm using the bright orange, which is the color exactly in the middle of the set. This is a very bright color and doesn't exactly match the photo reference. That's okay. Use the colors that you have and pick the color and the temperature and the value that's the closest. Then you end up with something a little bit more artistic and that has more of a voice than if you were to exactly match every single color exactly. After coming in with that bright orange, I moved to the second lightest value and I continue to build up depth and variety in the fur. This color is definitely most concentrated in the face, and I have a little bit of it along the ridgeline of the back and in the fur in the shoulder as well. Now I've switched to the lightest pastel in the set, and I'm focusing this in the areas that are going to be transitioning to white. Although this looks white on my paper so far because I don't have a white to compare it to, it definitely isn't. But this is going to be a great way to transition the whites and to have some darker shades in the white so that it feels like there's a lot of depth to the fur in those areas. So far, I've just been using the pastels and haven't introduced the colored pencils at all. That's because of the order that these materials need to be applied in. Here I have two different swatches of pastel, and notice how the colored pencil sticks right on top. You can see the lines really clearly. That's what we want. Now I'm going to apply pastel over the top of colored pencil, and you'll see that the pastel doesn't even stick. The wax in the colored pencil really resists anything besides waxy materials being placed on top of it. So keep in mind that order when you are layering your fur. You want tons and tons of layers, so you can grab your pastel pencils and continue to build up the depth and the richness in the color of the fur, but hold off on those colored pencils until you feel like the color in your fur is just about what you want and you're just looking for the black and white punch to take the value over the top. Pencil stroke and direction is really important when you're working with the colored pencils. And I want the hairs around the neck and the cheek to be growing away from the face. So that's the direction each of my individual hairs goes. When I'm working on other textures, this doesn't matter as much. In fact, I want these surfaces to feel different than the hairs. Once the darks are in solidly, I transition to the light sienna and I start finding those lightest values. The light sienna is lighter than the lightest pastel, but not quite as white as the white. So I'm gonna save the white for those big punches of white fur that I see in the ears, above the eye, in the cheek, and around the nose. And I want this to feel like fur. So again, rather than scribbling, I'm drawing individual hairs. This can sometimes feel like a slightly tedious process, but drawing the individual hairs and keeping focused on the direction that the fur is growing is so huge. This last item, the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Big Brush Pen, is going to help us finish off those last details in our drawing. This is going to be a more opaque, stronger white even than the Chinese white Derwent drawing pencil. Use this sparingly to really draw attention to those final features, and it's especially nice for the whiskers. When you play around with this brush pen on toned paper, you'll notice that once it dries, you can add more opacity to it with another layer. Also, there is a thicker nib on this brush pen, so if you want to play around with more delicate strokes, I would definitely practice them on a scratch piece of paper before doing it on your final sheet, especially for those whiskers. Let's put everything that we've learned together to create this drawing of a red panda. Start with your willow charcoal and create a very loose gestural sketch focusing on the basic shapes. Rather than transitioning to a permanent sketch with your Derwent drawing pencil, I want you to keep this really loose so that you can continue to adjust it throughout the drawing. After ghosting down your drawing with your finger, you can come in and start establishing some of the value. Here I am using the fourth darkest value, that warm brown, to establish the shadow shapes. This is a little bit more forgiving than the black, so it's a great place to start, especially if you're just figuring out where your color is going to be. Then I jumped to that middle value, the bright orange, so that I could add the intensity where I wanted. I definitely want the focal point to be on these two red pandas interacting with each other. So I'm going to focus the brightest color closest to the faces. As I transition away from the brightest color, I am going to the second lightest value and the lightest value to add some more richness and depth to the fur. I'm always drawing those tiny little strokes. I need these red pandas to feel different than the background, and because I have a red background, I want to tone it. I'm using the willow charcoal to do that, to just knock the background back a little bit. It's okay if my edges aren't perfectly refined. My Derwent drawing colored pencil is so great at refining the edges, so it's okay for things to be a little loose and hazy right now. The pastel pencils add some really nice contrast and depth to the fur, especially that caput mortem, which is going to be a little bit contrasting to the orange because it's got that rich red violet shade. And you can use this to add some emphasis to like the shadows underneath the fur. Go back and forth with your pastels. Any of the pastels can be applied in any order, and make sure that your color is the way that you want it before diving in with your colored pencils. And don't forget about that trunk in the foreground. This is a great place to add a little bit of light value color as well. Once it's time for the final details, I'm going in with my black Derwent drawing colored pencil first. And I'm being really cautious and sparing with this at the beginning, but giving myself permission to add more and more as I establish the darks. You'll notice, especially along the back of this red panda that's in the front, I have just little tiny areas of shadow in the fur so that I can really dial into that fur texture. Then I switch over to the light sienna, just like we did in our fur study, and I start bringing some more attention to the lightest areas of the drawing. After that's done, I'm diving in with the Chinese white Derwent drawing colored pencil, and I am focusing most of this white on the face that is in that second red panda, the one that's more in the background. Even though this red panda is in the background, it's really our focal point because it has the face that is viewing us. So most of the white is going to go here, and then I'm going to ease the white away as I move away from the focal point. For any of those areas that you want a little bit more intense, you can grab your brush pen and come in with little details to emphasize the whites. I definitely recommend practicing this on another piece of paper because these red pandas are pretty small on this 4x6 inch piece of paper, and this brush pen is really big. So practice those whiskers and get a feel for how little they need to be before you put them on your page. As I am finishing this up, I want to talk a little bit about how you can finish up your drawings and sketches. And a big part of this is giving yourself time to step back, analyze and assess what your drawing needs, and then coming in and with patience, finishing up those last details. Here I'm bouncing back and forth between the different Derwent drawing colored pencils, and I've even brought pastel into a couple of areas where it's mostly pastel or exposed paper. I'm refining the whiskers, I'm making some of the white shapes more clean, I'm adding some more whiskers, more white details, and I'm also playing around with contrast around the focal point. If you would like to practice another red panda, I strongly recommend that you check out the basic video for this month, which has a tutorial with the basic supplies with another red panda photo reference. So you'll be able to use your supplies and get a little extra practice. And now this piece is complete. I hope you learned a ton about drawing animals and rendering fur, and we can't wait to see what you create. So be sure to use the hashtag SketchboxJanuary when you post your work online. For more unboxing videos and tutorials, you can check out our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.